Welcome everyone. My name is Chelsea Corkins and I'm a Missouri 4-H specialist. And today we're going to be learning about secret messages and food science. We'll be covering topics such as chemical reactions and organic products and how you can use those different ideas and concepts, some of which you've probably learned in school, and write secret messages to your friends and family. But before we get started, a couple of things. First, this video is for educational purposes only. We do encourage adult supervision. You will be using heat for some of these chemical reactions, so make sure to get their help, particularly during those parts. Second, don't worry if we reference a packet. All of the materials that you're going to use today are common household items, so we didn't send you anything in a packet. You've got it already. Third is that we want to remind you to use that lesson plan. It's got some great reflection questions and some hints and answers to what might be happening during these chemical reactions and these organic processes. During that, also make sure you're using that data sheet that you can find in your electronic folder. As scientists, we love to use our data sheets so that we can change that independent variable and see what we might be able to change about the chemical reaction. Other than that, have fun. We're going to go over our materials here shortly and get started. All right, so some of the items we need for today, we're going to start over here with experiment 1. We've got some milk. I've got 1% specifically. You could use whatever you've got. Also some lemon juice, as well as we're going to use some cotton swabs and some printer paper. You can find this in your packet. It looks like something like this. Your printer paper is probably folded in half. And in this bag, you'll find your cotton swabs and some candy because we miss you all. For experiment number 2, we're going to use what's called red cabbage juice. You can make this at home. We'll talk about it a little bit in the experiment, but you just need red cabbage, chop it up, and either boil it for about 10 minutes and strain it, or chop it up, put it into a food processor or a blender, and then strain it. So you'll have this for our experiment number 2. Then our third experiment is wide open to what you might want to include. This will allow us to introduce some different variables. You can use things like baking soda. We've got our lemon juice again, some vinegar, an onion that we can do the same type of process we did with the red cabbage. But we're going to go ahead and get started with experiment number 1, and then we'll work through these, the steps to get to that third experiment. All right, so now that we've got our materials all ready to go, we're going to start with experiment number 1. So this one's pretty straightforward, but it's a lot of fun because in the end, you're creating a secret message. All right, so we're gonna start with those cotton swabs that we got. Make sure we have one piece of printer paper. Set this one off to the side for now. And we're gonna write our message on our paper. So you're gonna first start with your milk. A couple of tips: you don't wanna oversaturate your paper. Remember, if you've watched some of our 4-H live online learning videos, oversaturation means we've got too much of the wet stuff on there and it's not all being absorbed by the paper. What that's going to do is cause your paper to be pretty crinkly, and then you're going to be able to read what's on your message. So pretty simple process. Just dip your cotton swab into the milk and then design whatever you want. I found that going over slowly works best. So I'm just drawing a heart here in the middle. I'll let you in on my secret message. Try not to go over any lines more than once. That's when you'll run into that oversaturation. But you want to go a little slow to make sure it's depositing as much milk as it can. So if you can kind of see, I've got a little bit of a heart there on my paper. So we're going to set that aside. We're going to let that dry. Before we move to our next step, we want to make sure that dries, 1, so that you can't see the milk on it anymore, and 2, that helps us in our next process. You're also going to do the same thing with a little bit of our lemon juice. Okay, so I'm going to take the other side of our cotton swab, dip it in our lemon juice. This time, I decided I'm going to make a little bit of a smiley face. Now, it's totally up to you if you want to draw words, if you want to write out an actual message. Explore a little bit. See if you can write something pretty small and see if you can still see it at the end of the day. Or if you're like me, just keep to something a little bit bigger and see how it goes. So we've got our smiley face also on there. We're going to let that dry and then heat that up. So what is heating it up and what do we do there? First, you're going to grab an adult. Make sure that you've got adult supervision during this part because we're going to put heat into our materials, and that's what's going to cause them to change a different color than the paper. All right, so the best process that I've found and able to do that is to take your piece of paper once it's dry, to set that onto a heat safe area and then iron over top. Now you can usually take the iron and set it on top of the dried materials for about 10 to 15 seconds and then move to another section. Keep a close eye on it, of course, with your adult supervision, making sure you're not keeping it on there too long, but that'll start to reveal your secret message. If you really want to get secretive, you can even give your piece of paper, your message, to someone else and have them do this process. Let me show you a couple examples I did. So I used our 1% milk, which was this heart that I did here. It's a little bit of a different design. I actually wrote 4-H rocks. You can't see it too well on that 4-H. I moved my cotton swab too quickly. So remember I told you to go kind of slow there so it makes sure it absorbs all of it. So you'll see on that top line, the 4 and the dash are a little less bright. But down here where I was really slow, especially when I did that C in the part of the K, you can really see that after we heat up the materials. The second example I did was this lemon juice. Here's what that looks like after we heat it up. And keep in mind that I tried to do these with a couple different techniques. After finding out that the iron you worked the best, if I started with that to begin with, these might come out a little bit clearer. But try things a little bit differently. See what works best for you on those two. All right, so that's experiment number 1. If you want to go ahead and give that a try and then come on back to this video, we'll work on to experiment number 2. Welcome back, everyone, or if you're watching the video straight through, thanks for continuing to watch. We're going to start by talking about why did this work? Well, in this case, we are taking organic materials. We like to call those organics in science, are things that are natural. They're from animals and plants. In this case, we had milk and lemon juice. And those are going to burn a little lower temperature than we'll have some of our other items. So you're having that turn brown and getting that coloration that you don't see on the paper around it. Obviously, if you were to burn the entire paper, the entire thing would turn brown color. It would eventually disintegrate. And so there's limits to that for sure. For our more advanced science campers today, you'll hear the term organic material. That's the top layer of soil that we use a lot of times in farming, in agriculture, in gardening. That's where all of our living particles are. That's why we call it organic material, because that's where our live things are. Again, some cool science connections between what we're doing here today in our science experiment with our secret messages and the science you'll see later on in some of what you do in school. Okay, so we are now going to experiment number 2. We're going to start with some of the same things. We're going to start with our lemon juice. If you found that your lemon juice gave your paper a bit of a tint that causes it to, you'll be able to see your secret message, you can dilute it a little bit. That's okay. Just remember to slow down on your movement so you're getting a lot of it on the paper. So again, we're going to take the cotton swab, dip it in here. Oh, what should I make today? I'd try a clover, but I tried that once before and it didn't work very well. So we're just going to do another 4-H. I'm not the best artist, but that's okay. It's all about trying. So we've got our 4-H. All right. So same process as before. We're going to let that dry. Usually it takes, 15, 20 minutes for it to completely dry. And then we're going to take our red cabbage juice. So again, for those that might have missed it in our first section of this video, red cabbage juice can be made by taking a red cabbage, chopping up into pretty small particles, and then putting that into boiling water for about 10 minutes. You can also take that chopped up cabbage and put it in a food processor or blender and put boiling water in there, pulse it a little bit, and that helps extract the juice as well. Either option seems to work pretty well. Once you have that kind of pulp, you're going to put it into a strainer, whatever you've got around your house. I've got a nice fine hold strainer. You could try a coffee filter. I haven't tried that before, but that could work. That might take some of your liquid out, so be careful though. And pour your whole sludge into that, and then you'll end up with something that looks close to this. Okay, so your next step is to take that red cabbage juice and put it into a squirt bottle. Mine's just water right now, but you dump this, I dump out the water and I put our red cabbage juice in here. What you're gonna do once this is dry is then spray your red cabbage juice on top, okay? I'm not going to do this one for you because it's one of my favorite science reactions. It should do a pretty cool thing to what you've written on the paper. So I'm going to let you do that one on your own. Hopefully we can report back. We're going to then talk about experiment number 3, talk a little bit about what happened with this experiment number 2, and then we're going to wrap it up for today. All right, welcome back. Did you try experiment number 2? Did you see the cool color change? Hopefully that worked well for you. We're going to talk a little bit about why that worked, and then we'll move on to experiment number 3. So I told you our red cabbage juice is pretty magical because it is what we call a neutral 7.0 pH. It also acts then as an indicator for our pH. All right, so here's some more vocabulary that you might learn throughout your time in science if you haven't already. Certain materials have an acidic pH, which means that their acidity is less than 7. Some materials have a higher pH, which means that their pH is greater than 7, up to 14 actually. When you take some of your acidic materials and use this as an indicator, so for example, lemon juice is very acidic. We took that and sprayed our red cabbage juice on top of it. That should have caused what was our white to turn a little bit pink or red. So if you're moving more in the acidic realm, this is going to move into a pink kind of tint to it. Now, if you go more towards the basic, which an example of that would be baking soda, you're going to see this purple, or in that case, it'll be a clear material on your paper. That's going to start to turn more blue and green. You can actually take those colors that you get then and determine the, or at least estimate the pH of your materials. That's a good way that you'll have pH indicators in future science classes that you do, especially chemistry. So this is a natural way that we can do that. Hopefully you had a little fun with it to see that it would change the colors of what we got with our lemon juice. Feel free to try some other materials, see if baking soda works, see if you can get some different colors in the rainbow. All right, so for our last experiment, this is going to be a lot up to you. This is where you really get to be that food scientist and determine properties about what you're looking at based on what we just learned in our experiment number 1 and number 2. All right, so I've got different items: baking soda, lemon juice, vinegar. I've got an onion. I've got a potato. Some different items that you probably just have around the house. For these solid items, we're going to do the same thing we did with the cabbage, which is cut them up a little bit, put it in boiling water, and then extract those solids from the liquid so that you've got your liquid property. Same thing you would with your vinegar or your lemon juice. You can do the same with baking soda, just mix that up in your water until it's just a liquid. Then you're going to do whatever you think you want to try. So you'll find in your learning packet a table that is going to say secret message, food science. In there, you have the option to put in some of these different items and then to take notes and to see how well they worked. Some of these items are going to work much better at being what we had with our lemon juice and our milk than what you'll have for some other products. But give that a try. You can either use the method that we did for heating, or you can try it with your red cabbage, whichever you prefer, but make sure to take notes on that. There's a little space in your table that you can write down how did you process your liquid and your secret message. How did you determine how do you transfer that? So make sure you're writing that down, whether you used heat or your red cabbage, and make sure you're indicating what you started with. See what works best, see what combinations of those different things called independent variables give you the best result. And then maybe you can rank those. And then you can go and show different family members, friends, what you've been doing and send them secret messages. Hopefully this was a good activity for everyone. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions. You'll find in your learning packet that there are some reflection questions in there that you might want to check out. Things like, what did you enjoy about this activity? How are you going to use it in the future? If you have any questions about those, you want any of the answers or to discuss maybe some possible answers in the future, my contact information is on the bottom of that page as well. Again, my name is Chelsea Corkins, and thanks for hanging out with us.